Hey, good evening. This is Jared Calgar. I'm the teaching pastor from Bridgepoint, and I am with Carol Miller here. We want to welcome you to Bridgepoint's first ever web event like this. We are taking this moment to talk about an issue that I think is very personal and very important to all of us. We're going to talk about mental wellness, mental health during a global pandemic and the holidays and heading into winter. And so we want to welcome you. We are glad that you are with us. I want to give you just a couple ways that you can participate from the very beginning. If you know someone you think would benefit from this, we want to invite you just right now to click the share button. Maybe you share it and tag them in it or send it in a direct message just to let them know that this is available. This will be available to watch after it is complete on a couple different platforms, on Facebook and on YouTube. And so we hope and pray that this is a really meaningful event for you. I do want to introduce you to one other person that is involved in this. We have our online facilitator over here, Alyssa Carr. She's at the ground level, and you'll see her in just a moment. Can we say hi? There's Alyssa. She's hanging in the shadows. And one other important person to mention right now is Ulana Chapman. She is our online host. And so if you are present in the online, in the comments, you can just say hi to her. She does a lot with our hosting on Sunday mornings. And so she will be her and Alyssa will be facilitating the interaction between our online audience and then Carol and me here on stage. And so we just want to welcome you wherever you're watching from. We hope this is helpful. I do want to mention also that as we get into this, there will be a question and answer section at the very end of our time together. We hope to be able to address many of the questions that you might have, but if during this something we say creates a question or you have something that you'd like to talk about, you can share that in the comments there on Facebook, and Ulana and Alyssa will interact to compile those throughout the whole time together. And then at the end, they will feed us the questions and we'll do our best to offer our answers. With that said, we are really excited to be a part of this. We believe that as a church, we want to speak into and make a difference in not only the eternal needs, which we believe matter most, but also the immediate needs that people feel here and now. And so this is an opportunity for us to do this, to show and share the wisdom of God and to provide ways for us to experience life at its best, even in the midst of all that we're facing. And so with all that said, I have to confess that I am not the expert. I am not well versed in mental health, in personal crisis, and so I would be in way over my head if I was here alone, but fortunately I'm not. And so I want to throw it over for just a minute to Carol Miller, whom I'll be interviewing. Carol is very special to me. I feel like I need to disclose this. She is my mother-in-law, but that is not why she is here. She is a professional in the field of mental health and counseling. And so Carol, could you just introduce yourself and share a little bit of your background?
Okay, sure. I am a marriage and family therapist. I'm licensed in the state of Rhode Island and New Hampshire. I'm currently serving with Paradigm Biblical Counseling here in Providence, Rhode Island. My background, I've been in private practice as well as community mental health and served in some nonprofit settings, including the church. Feel that this is my call and my contribution to the kingdom, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to speak because we are indeed in a time that merits our attention to holistic care. So thank you, Jared, for that opportunity.
We're glad to have you with us, that is for sure. The format for tonight is going to be first a conversation between Carol and me. I'll be asking questions and just reflecting together on where we're at and how we can pursue mental wellness together. And then at the end, like I said, we'll have a question and answer time. But before we get there, I do want to ask for his wisdom, and then we'll get into this. Okay. All right? So Father God, right here, wherever people are as they watch this, God, I pray that your wisdom would shine brightly tonight. I pray that you would fill our words with your wisdom and power. I pray that you help people to hear exactly what they need to hear. And so, Holy Spirit, speak to us, guide us now, and lead us on the path to wholeness and health that we might experience life as you want us to. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So as we talk about this, you know,
Unexpected, and
Right.
we're unprepared, and
Yeah.
we have no control, and we don't like it, and we want it to end, and yet the only way to get through it is really to go through
yeah,
it.
to get through it, to come out the other side, and it's so true. I have watched our staff team just respond with frustration and discouragement at times. I think the deepest levels of discouragement we felt are when we know that a change is coming. Like there's, whether it's with a pause or earlier in the year with further lockdowns, and not knowing exactly what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, or how long it's going to last. And so we don't like where we are. We don't like where we're going,
Exactly.
but we don't know exactly like how everything's going to play out or what
Right.
we can do about it. And I think that in addition to all of the uncertainty, unpleasantness, and lack of control, like so if that's our foundation, and it's felt like our foundation has cracked a little bit, there are other pressures that we are dealing with now throughout this last year. It's not like COVID is the only thing we've dealt with. Like you've talked about how, parents still have kids, like people still have jobs. There's still financial fears and other medical issues to deal with. And then on top of that, just throughout this year, we have come face to face with some really deep questions, deep issues, matters of social justice and racial justice,
Exactly.
and financial fears, and a political cycle that did not bring out the best in us. And it's just like we're facing all of this with a fragile foundation.
Right. In fact, Barna just did a research on people gauging the status of their mental health. And it's a self-report study, but it was interesting that in the month of November that we just came through, there was the most significant drop in people's self-perceived level of mental health.
Wow.
The most seen in over 2 decades. And that's significant in that we're realizing that we're off, that we're not the way we would like to be, and we're not our typical.
Yeah.
And we're trying to grab a hold of something that will give us a sense of security and control. And it feels like we're often trying to grab for some Jell-O.
Yeah, that's a
slips
good way.
through our fingers.
That's a good way to put it. Before we get into the really practical things we can do to move toward health, I want to take one step further in helping people to identify, like, really how this is affecting them. And so, what would you say are things that people can look for as they're trying to determine, like, how much has all of this truly affected my mental health?
I often say to people, let's check our gauges, and that means just taking a pause and really being present with ourselves to take a look at what's going on inside. Our bodies are wired to give us indicators when things are off, and honestly, it's easy to ignore those indicators. We often run on empty, but our bodies are telling us when we're fatigued, when we're having trouble sleeping, actually is one of the biggest indicators that something's off. Either I can't fall asleep, I'm restless, my thoughts are racing, and I'm waking up in the middle of the night, worried, concerned, anxious. My sleep is off. Or it can go conversely. I want to sleep too much. I just don't even want to get out of bed. Yeah. I lack the energy. I'm not enjoying things that I typically do. I feel sad. My mood is off. So that can set things in play with our bodies too, that we feel this tension. We might feel headaches or clenching our jaws, tightness in our chest, even noticing if our heart's racing. All of these can be indicators that we're experiencing something that's not our normal. It might be like the anxiety symptoms I just kind of prefaced, or it can be something more like, I just can't focus. I feel apathetic. I feel just not myself. Paying attention to those can be an indicator that we might need some help. We may need to make some adjustments. When we're confronted with challenges that we can't change outside of us, we're encouraged to look at what we can adjust within us to adapt to the crisis.
Absolutely. I think that it's really helpful as we try to move toward the practical. Carol has just given us several things to watch out for, several things to look for, and if one or more of those seems to apply to you right where you're at, then our hope is in the next part of this conversation we'd be able to provide just a few things that you could put into practice. So look around and ask, like, is there something off with your sleep patterns, too much or too little? I thought one of the things that you shared that was so helpful is, are you delighting less in the things that you normally enjoy? I felt that, about a month ago, like usually being active is something that I really look forward to. And like, I felt kind of apathetic or lethargic toward it, and it felt strange. And so that indicates, I think, the way that we, you'd mentioned this also, the way we interact with the people closest to us, distancing ourselves from them, disconnecting, or doing the opposite and coming at them in unpleasant ways, if that's irregular. And did I just lose my mic? I'm good. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. So any irregularity in the way that you're interacting with people, like, I think that all of that is just so helpful. And so again, if any of that or all of that or some of it applies to you, then the hope is that maybe in this next section we can just point to a few things. And so here's what I want to mention. We are going to talk about two sides of this. Once you're aware that maybe you're in a rut or you're in a down spot, there are two levels to self-care. And the first is that you figure out how you can make some changes and maybe exert some control that puts you in a better position to be emotionally and mentally healthy. Then there are other times, and this is the second layer we'll get to in a little bit, there are other times where you just cannot pull yourself up. And so we're also going to talk about how to know when it's time to find some help outside of you. And so in these next two sections, we're going to talk about a lot of very practical things. And my encouragement for you is to not try to do all of it, because that'll feel like a task list that will push you further down into feelings of failure and inadequacy. Don't do that. Our hope is that we would speak about at least a couple things that you would relate to, that it would immediately resonate with you, and you would say, yes, if I do that, I think I would be better. And so grab a pen and paper if you don't have it already, and as we're talking about a few of the things we can do to be mentally well, mentally whole, just take a few notes and highlight a couple things that you'd like to focus on. And the good news is, if you master those and are ready for something else, you can always go onto our blog and watch this later and write a couple more things down. So with that said, as we get into caring for ourselves, making sometimes minor adjustments that give us a feeling of control and stability and put us in a position to be healthy, like where would you start with advising us to make those changes?
Changing some perspectives and just shifting some of our focus. I like to talk about self-care in the context of stewardship, of something we've been given in our lives, in our bodies, in our being. This is the vessel that we have to express who we are, who we've been created to be. Our very things that we do for ourselves in this time are very important, especially those of us who are responsible for the care of other people, like children. They're looking to us, and they often don't know what to do, so what we can do to help ourselves is actually helping more than just ourselves. It's being compounded by in helping those that we're around. Basic things of input. This is a time to be putting good stuff in us.
Yes.
Starting with the Word, I can't just push any of the sermons in the series to be encouraging us to spend time in the Word, because we need extra help right now. Spiritual help that goes beyond our own physical, mental abilities. We need good things and just the input and the things that we focus on in our minds. God gives us an ability to change focus, to be able to look for and to find things that are good, because He is good, and there is much good in our world and around us, even when it's hard. We tend to find what we look for. And just to undo that by eliminating a lot of the negatives that are in our world and that we're exposed to. We were sharing earlier about there's just such an urge to want to be in the know and to watch lots of news. And a little bit of news is good to stay in the know. Too much news can feel overwhelming, and a disadvantage of that exposure just can put us in a place that's not helpful.
That's right. Yeah. You've talked also about like the first thoughts of our day, and how important those
First
are.
thoughts, yeah.
So, so talk about that for just a minute.
Our first waking awareness often sets the tone for the day, and we can become in a habit of it, especially if we start thinking about how I dread what I'm facing.
Yeah.
That sets a tone. It sets an attitude. It sets an intention in our brains, actually, that then reinforce that we're looking for all the things we dread, and we're finding evidence that this was indeed a day to be dreaded, instead of an opportunity to look for things. Even if it's a cry to God, help me today, to start our day out that way rather than this burdensome, oh God, look at everything that's wrong, or I'm not even crying out to God, but to believe that He hears that cry. Just a simple practice that can happen. Start with something positive like the Word before we pick up our phones. That can be a real discipline, I know. But once, I know what happens to me when I open my phone up first. There's a rabbit hole of all kinds of stuff to get my attention. Just starting those first few moments in the Word and quiet and ease into the day, but to start that first thought in a positive one.
I think it's so helpful. I have friends that have chosen to buy alarm clocks so that they don't use their phone for alarm clock, and then just once they turn it off, they go into whatever they use it for. And so I thought that was just really insightful to really pay attention to where we start our day, how we start our day, what we look at first, what we consume first. And I had never thought of it before like this, but like when we find ourselves craving more information, it's really us trying to make sense, trying to feel in control and in the know. But it never works, does it? It makes it worse. It's like this self-fulfilling prophecy that like I'm going to worry about it, so I'm going to try and deal with it, and by dealing with it, it makes it worse. So just be really mindful. So that's the first thing, is be really mindful of what you're putting into your mind, because it will shape you and it really directs your days. One of the things I'd like to share is we believe that God created us, and God knows how we thrive best. And if you've ever been to a zoo, you watch animals that are not in their natural habitat. They're not in the setting they were created for, and they don't thrive. There is irregular or inconsistent or uncharacteristic behavior because their environment is off, right? And I think that we live kind of outside of how we've been created most of the time, but COVID has enhanced that and exacerbated it. And so I want to highlight just a few ways that we can return, I think, to the way that we have been created. And I really believe that these things can help us thrive. So I do not believe that God created us to spend all of our time indoors. Like that, I don't know anyone that would argue that we are at our best when we are in a closed, dark room all the time. And so being outside or being at least near a window is so important. Like you were created to have access to nature and outside and fresh air. And so I believe that even when it's cold out, it is worth putting on a stocking cap and gloves and a hat and going for a 20-minute walk at some point in the middle of your day. Like just getting outside, getting fresh air, feeling the wind, seeing the sun. And if you can't do that for some reason, at least put yourself in a position to look out the window, and so try to create that. I also don't believe we were created to be still, inactive. I think God created us to be people who move, and life is best. We feel better when we move. And so, again, like our movement, our activity, things around us are trying to stop us from moving, right? Like that's part of the protocol for staying healthy, and yet it is having an adverse effect. And so only you know exactly how you can move about. Like if you live in an apartment building, if you're working from home, if you got kids that you're trying to attend to all day long, or you're in an office, but you've been asked to stay at your desk more. You've got to be creative. Maybe it's before work or after work, or
Right. A 5-minute break.
That's right.
3 times a day, we'll get in 15 minutes.
That's right.
And we need the movement, especially those of us that are finding ourselves sitting and staring at screens. Our children need it. We're not wired to be
That's right.
in that position.
Yeah. So spending time outside, being active. Another thing is we were not created to live life alone. In fact, I believe that isolation was actually the first human need that God solved. And so we cannot thrive when we're by ourselves. And so yet our worlds have closed in. We feel like we are more by ourselves than ever before. Even if you are surrounded by a house full of chaos, you still feel isolated because that's not life-giving community a lot of the time. And so, however you are choosing to live within the guidelines, like what you need to do is make sure that you're not isolated, you're not disconnected from people. So, a phone call goes a long way. I know that you all are probably zoomed out, but doing Zoom for the sake of connecting with friends can be really refreshing. Finding a way to spend time outside with someone, like all of that just reconnects you with people, which is part of how God created us. And as we talk about this just a little bit more, you've talked about the value, Carol, of rhythms and routines.
Right. We were wired to have some structure, and structure brings a sense of control out of what seems chaos. And structures can be as simple as routines and rhythms, how we do our meals, how we wake up, how we go to bed. Especially, I think for children, but for all of us, we've been disrupted, and the things that we look to on the outside for those structures is either missing or it's been completely changed. So it does take some discipline, and it takes some intentionality to realize what can add a sense of order in this chaos that we find ourselves in, and that it has to come from within in an intentional way of planning and structuring our time.
It makes perfect sense, though. It gives us a sense of control when everything else is out of control. Something else that you mentioned in talking about like just really simple things that we can do to move toward health and to move toward wholeness is to readjust our expectations.
Right. We've expected, or I was gauging myself, we've expected everything from that this would last only a couple weeks related to COVID, but expecting what we expect of ourselves and from others, that we as well as everyone around us are trying to make adjustments that are uncomfortable. We're out of our norm. We're trying to make sense of so many things. So lower some of our expectations, especially when it comes to performance. Learning our limits, I guess, has been another humbling situation, that it means working in a different way. The things that I expected previously, I have to adjust on. I can navigate the waters better if the pressures are more realistic. And we have to face that sometimes we can have rather unrealistic expectations of both of ourselves and of other people.
It's so true. I have found myself frequently comparing life now with what life used to be. I mean, even as we head toward the holidays, we're thinking like, oh yeah, this is what we would normally expect out of Thanksgiving or out of Christmas. And the reality is, if we live right now with old expectations, we are going to be constantly disappointed. Right. Because those expectations don't apply anymore. And at some point, we either just have to embrace disappointment and live in that all the time, which I don't think anyone wants to do, or we have to change our expectations and say, like, this year is going to be different. That work is different, school is different, home is different, everything is different. And doesn't necessarily mean that you love what's different, but you stop expecting something that will not happen. Right.
And yet we can also expect good
Yeah,
to
that's
come
right.
out of what's different and what's difficult. And I think many of us are already finding some things that we might like better
Yeah.
than the way it was previously.
Yeah.
A lot of things we don't, but they're
Right.
still good.
Still good.
Recognizing when our self-talk is being self-condemning and judgmental and harsh. We often say things to ourselves in our inner dialogue that we would never say to other people. However, if we find ourselves saying those things to other people, that could be another one of those check your gauges when maybe I'm out of, I'm needing a break here.
Right.
But just be mindful of this dialogue that runs in our heads 24/7 often, but what we're telling ourselves about ourselves and our performance and
Yeah.
how we're doing.
I think that those false narratives or those internal dialogues that skew to the negative are what takes someone who's on a downward slope
Yes.
and supercharge them, force them, put a turbo booster into that descent, right? It's like when you are dealing with something and then internally you start to blame, start to criticize, start to self-deprecate, start to despair, then it just gets so dark so quickly. And so I really appreciate that focus on paying close attention. I think often about the passage that says, take every thought captive and make it obedient to Jesus. Test it against the truth that you know. And if you are hearing things, whether it's from yourself or other people, that do not align with what Christ says about you, what God declares is true about you, then it's important to take control of that and align it with his truth. So we want to move into, shift gears a little bit and move into a brief section about how to know when we can't care for ourselves. There are times where we can, if you think about it physically, there are times where I've got aches and pains that a little bit of ice and Advil can deal with, right? But then there are other times where it's I don't know what's going on. I can't fix it myself, and I've got to go get help outside of myself. And so and just start by helping, maybe sharing just a few key indicators of when someone might be in a position where they need to go, to someone for help.
Some of the, as I mentioned before, one of the most apparent gauge can be if we're not sleeping well, and that extends for more than a few days. Disrupted sleep will put any of us quickly in a place that's not healthy and not good. So if we're noticing in ourselves a pattern of disrupted sleep that lasts into weeks, it's probably a good indication that we might need some help. If we find ourselves being in a pattern that we're stuck, that we just can't seem to climb out of it, and again, it's lasting not just a moment or a day, it's turning into weeks and months, and we're recognizing that we're just not ourselves. Especially if that includes the despairing, hopeless thoughts that turn into wanting to avoid, to escape, and actually looking for relief in self-harming ways, despairing to the point of believing that death might be the only outlet, and our thoughts turn to suicidal thoughts or self-harming thoughts. Those are the big signs. Any thought of self-harm is like the sharp chest pain. It's saying that we need help immediately, and it could be an emergency situation. This is when it becomes life-threatening. That's the big sign. Other symptoms, if we find ourselves being trapped in addictions, when we're looking for relief that turn into things that we can't stop on our own, we're finding whether it's substance use, behavior, shopping, spending, gaming. Unfortunately, our frequent use of computers makes us very, very vulnerable to some of the things like pornography and gaming that give us a sense of relief in the momentary, but turn into a much bigger problem in the long term that are detrimental to every aspect of our health and to our relationships.
That's right. Yeah. One of the other things you had mentioned just as a quick indicator is if you notice that your behavior consistently negatively affects the people closest to you.
Right.
You know, if you were noticing the way that you were speaking, the way that you were reacting, the way that you were present or not present, that can really indicate that it is a big enough problem and a big enough danger that that it's worth going beyond yourself to get what you need. So that's all really helpful. And so then if someone's hearing this and they're thinking, okay, I think that's me. I want to take a few of the smaller steps to care for myself, but I realize that this problem, like I want to be whole, I want to be healthy. What do I do next?
Reaching out for help can seem like a really huge step, but it's such an important one when we're in need. Talking about what we're feeling can be a first step. Speaking what's going on inside of us can shine light onto these thoughts that often just roll around into our head. And often when we speak them, we really recognize where we are. We could say, oh, this is not so good, or I really do need some help. I know for many of us in this time of isolation, reaching out for help or just talking to someone seems like an impossibility because we've lost those connections. Starting with friends, someone that we trust can be a starting place. Family members that we feel comfortable and safe with. Other people in our lives, and I know pastors are our go-to, and that's why the church and church staff are so crucial in this time, because many times we turn to our spiritual leaders. Your doctor, medical providers, or other often who people turn to, and those are good resources, because sometimes what we're feeling in our bodies can actually be the effects of physical illness or other things that are developing in our health that we need attention to. And our doctors can be on the front line of helping us rule out what's happening for us and to us. Counselors are another level of help. Therapists, to seek that kind of help, especially when we need a higher level than our friends and family members can provide.
That's really good. You know, as one of the pastors on staff with Bridgepoint, we want you to know that this is part of why we're here. We love you, and we want to help you move forward on the path to experience life at its best as God intends. And that means walking through some of these struggles with you. It means counseling and encouraging and strengthening you. And so we can only do that when you reach out to us. And so we invite you to do that. Additionally, we want to be a church that resources not only the people of the church, but even the community around us with what they need to be at their best. And so this video will appear on our blog, and when that appears, probably tomorrow, it will be posted with a few resources, just local resources, online resources, addiction resources that you can peruse to figure out if there's something there for you. And so please do not hesitate. I can speak on behalf of Carol too. I know that Paradigm Biblical Counseling, who she works with, they take insurance, all major insurances, and I can speak on behalf of the shepherds and staff of Bridgepoint and saying if a financial need is keeping you from getting the self-care that you need, reach out to us. Like, we are happy to help you get connected and get you started in that. So please do not let that be a barrier. It's just so important that you take the right steps, because the reality is we're going to be in this long enough. You had mentioned that this pandemic is lasting long enough that these bad habits are going to be permanent habits if we don't do something about it. And this is lasting long enough that I don't think anyone has been free from making major life decisions during this time, right? And so we want to be able to make those out of a good spot. And so it's so critical that we take this head on. It's important for you. It's important for your future. It's important for your work, your kids, your spouse, if you have one. It's important to your community of faith and even the community at large. That they need you at your best. And so please just understand that there's a lot at stake here, and we hope that this has been helpful for you. So with our remaining time, we wanted to field a few questions. So I understand, Alyssa, do we have a few questions over here? All right, she's got a few lined up for us, and I'm a little nervous. We had time to prepare for everything else, but this is just ready to go. So Alyssa, feel free to lead us here.
Okay, our first question is, for those of us starting therapy this week, are there any recommendations on how to make the most of these sessions?
That's a good question. I'm going to let Carol answer that.
Yeah, it's starting therapy this week. One thing that I would encourage you to do is to spend some time on pause, to give some reflection to really what is going on within you. It can seem so hard just to slow down and to be present with ourselves. And out of that time, with an awareness of really what it is you're hoping to receive help for, what that would look like. I know that might be a vague question, but to really clue into what an expectation is of help so that the counselor or therapist can come alongside and help to meet those goals and direct the course of treatment.
That's good. Something you said reminded me, the staff has been working through a book that is helping us to be emotionally healthy and mentally well. And one of the things that was recommended in that book, Emotionally Healthy Leader, if anybody wants to know, that's what we're going through. We were encouraged that when we feel strong emotions, strong negative emotions, to journal through that and ask the question, what am I feeling and why am I feeling it? And I've had plenty of opportunities to put that into practice during COVID. And I'm amazed at the clarity that can come even when it's just me. Like that when I pause, slow down, identify what I'm feeling, and really dive into like where's this coming from? So much clarity can happen. And so I assume that if someone's heading toward counseling or therapy, take a moment to reflect on that. If you're just on your own, not moving into a session, but really wanting to understand yourself better, that has been a really helpful practice. That's good. Good.
Okay, our next question. Do you agree that when you are in crisis mode, you are unable to plan for the future, and that becomes very uncomfortable? And do you agree with that? And is that especially true for young adults?
Moving into crisis mode definitely hinders some of our natural abilities, things that come more naturally for us when we're not stressed and overwhelmed. Making decisions in crisis times can be a bit precarious because often we're making decisions out of the crisis rather than really what's in the longer term. So I guess I would answer that. I agree that it's really hard to make decisions during a time of crisis. And on the flip side, it might not be the best time to be making especially life-changing decisions because we might not be functioning at our best and seeing the world and ourselves with the clarity that can come when we're out of this stress mode. I'm hearing that many people right now, and one of the benefits of a crisis, it eventually helps us to sort through the things that are our priorities. We help identify those values and the things that are really important to us. Crisis can bring some clarity, but it's often after we've moved through the crisis that we get a little more clarity. Many times in crisis, we're trying to make decisions to get relief or to believe if we change this circumstance, I'm going to be out of crisis mode. And again, it can change some circumstances, but often there's a saying, wherever I go, there I am. And so the crisis might also be there where I'm going. So
I think that it makes sense to me that pain in the present would make it hard to focus on the future.
Oh, sure.
You know, in the same way that your body it constricts all blood flow to the organ in crisis, or the place in crisis. Like that's where your attention is consumed. When you don't like what is right now, it's really hard to give attention to it beyond that. What I would say though is I think that a clear view of the future helps us to get through crisis. You know, if we, I think that if we can understand what good this might accomplish in us, or if we can look ahead to the other end of crisis and say, what do I want to be true on the other side?
Indeed.
Then that may not be a major life decision, but it's a vision or a value for your life
Right.
that can get you through this. I know that for my family, we have discovered some things about our family, what we enjoy sharing. I've learned a lot about my personal leadership, and a lot of that is because at the beginning I said, I want this to be true. I want to grow as a leader. I want my family to delight in time together more than we have before. And so those became like governing principles that helped us make it through and to see purpose in it, even in the pain.
Indeed.
And so that would be my encouragement to you is, if you're feeling like you're having a hard time living in the future, look into the future and say, what do I want to be true about my life? What do I want to be true about me on the other side of this? Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay. What should we do when we feel lonely and have no community or anyone to reach out to?
That's good. You want me to start?
Go ahead.
Take a Bridgepoint class.
I was going to say be a part of a mini group.
Yeah, be a part of a tiny group. Join a team. No, I'm sorry. So in all seriousness, in January, we recognize that community is so much harder to find right now. And because when you think about it, most of the environments where we used to experience community have been in some way changed or completely shut down. So, people used to find community at work. Most of it's work from home right now. There's no community in your stay-at-home office. People used to find community in things like small groups or events through the church. Like we really can't do those. Those are virtual. People used to find community at restaurants, at establishments, at fitness facilities, and those aren't even active. And so the possibility, like even during the winter, it's hard to find a place to hang out with people. To actually, like, if you want to socially distance and be safe and healthy, like, there just is not that opportunity. And so whoever's asking this, what I would say is you are not alone in the feeling of isolation. We don't want you to be alone in feeling like you don't have anyone to reach out to. And so one of the things we can do is just invite you to email info@bridgepointchristian.com. And just express that need. And we have a couple pastors on staff that are really good at connecting people to the right environments where they can meet people and form community. I believe that is one of the solutions that the church can offer to this broken and isolated world. It's like when the church is at its best, it is offering opportunities for community. And so we have a plan already in place for January and February and March for mostly online, but some limited in-person community where relationships can be built and conversation can be had. So that's really what I would invite you to do, is if you are looking for that, please don't leave us out of the conversation. Let us be a part of it with you, and we believe that that's something the church can do something about. That's great. Is that it? Alyssa, do you have any questions? I'm going to put Alyssa on this spot. She told me not to do that. Man, I think that's, yeah. Alyssa, do you have something?
Yeah, I can think of another question. How about, is something like binge eating out of boredom or stress, or, is that something to be concerned about?
It can be. We're all looking for things that are comforting right now, and food is a go-to. Food, like any other solution that we might seek to bring ourselves relief, can turn into a habit that becomes detrimental. I know we're jokingly talking about the COVID-15,
Right.
and now the longer the stretches, and with the holidays here upon us, we're talking about weight gain. But just check in with our bodies to know when we're developing habits, whether it involves food. I mentioned shopping, spending, anything that we're seeking relief for in the momentary can become a negative habit. It can actually create bigger problems than it relieves. And I think this is where checking our own gauges and knowing what we might be doing to self-soothe and self-manage that could be detrimental.
Yeah, I don't think that we know that you shouldn't be mastered by anything, right? That you shouldn't be compulsively controlled by anything. I also think at this time, though, that it is okay in moderation and with self-control to allow yourself some delights in life, right? If you really like a midday bowl of ice cream, then in moderation, eat a midday bowl of ice cream because we all need a win, right? And so I think that it's this tension, like evil always comes in two extremes. In giving in to every impulse and desire, you are going down a path that lacks self-control and can lead you away from the true source of comfort. But if like full self-deprivation is also not the solution, especially when it feels like so many of the things you delight in have been taken away. And so find that middle ground where you can delight in life, but without being addicted or controlled to it. Yeah, that's a great question. Looks like we got one more.
Yeah, so I'm reaching out to some people who I know are listening, and a friend of mine couldn't listen, and I just want to let you know what she's doing at this moment. She's sitting in the parking lot at Walgreens crying from stress and fear. And I know she's not the only one who does that. So what do you think, what would you recommend for her? I think she should listen to this whole program when it's available tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah. In one way, responding and crying in the parking lot is not that evil. It's
right.
It's really accepting this is where I am, and
That's right.
Crying can give an expression to a lot of the emotions that our words lack. Again, going to when this could be problematic is if we find ourselves crying more than not, then that's an indication that we might need some assistance. But in one way, this sounds paradoxical, but to say that in acceptance of where we are often can be freeing to just recognize I am having these strong emotions to this really yucky situation. There's a saying in crisis management that an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal.
Yeah.
And some of that is just accepting that this is where I am right now. This is not going to be forever. But Lord, hear my cry. I need your help. I'm human. I've met my limitation, and boy, I invite you, God, to help fill in the gap and empower me for this next step.
Yeah.
I didn't say this earlier, but in some of our shifting focus, it is just looking at today without getting too far down the road. That's when anxiety and all of our what-if stories can start spiraling. Even saying, look at this moment. Can I make it this moment? Can I make it the next 5? Can I make it till noon? Can I make it to the evening? And day by day, we've made it 8 months through COVID.
Yeah, that's right.
And
that's right.
I know it's overwhelming to think that we might have however much time ahead of us, but focusing the positive. So I don't know if that addresses, but...
Yeah, I'm reminded of something that I read, and I wish I could quote the source. I don't remember where it was, but it described our generation as the first generation that has feelings about our feelings. You know, that we don't just feel sad, but then we feel something about feeling sad. We feel angry, or we feel embarrassed, or we feel ashamed about an emotion. And I think that for this friend in the parking lot, like, it's really important to acknowledge there's a reason to cry right now. That like everyone has lost something.
Yes.
Some have lost loved ones. Some have lost their like preferred future in the short term. Some have lost friendships. Some have lost security. Some have lost opportunity. Like, the point is that like we have lost. We have grieved, and it is really important to give yourself permission to feel that without even feeling something about that.
Without the guilt and
That's
the shame
right.
about it.
That's
And
right.
I think this is where Scripture just supports. The Psalms are full of laments and cries, and they're not always pretty. They're just in the
That's right.
raw emotion of the moment of people crying out, and we too share those. We share the laments, and it's in those expressions that I believe God draws so near to us.
That's right.
He's drawn to our pain, and as a loving parent wants to console us in that. And it's just a point of connection if we can allow that to accept ourselves in that.
Yeah.
And
The you know, as if you are someone who's trying to figure out how to care for a friend who is feeling something like that, feeling like they're overwhelmed in crisis, it can be really awkward. And uncomfortable to know what to do with our current situation. I had an experience like this actually just last night. A good friend of mine called, and their family is just going through, in the midst of crisis, their family's going through crisis. And when I picked up the phone, all I heard was tears. And through soft words, I started to understand the situation. And if we were face to face, there's nothing uncomfortable about just like embracing someone while they cry. But because we are distanced, it's like I don't know what to do on the phone. Like, you're crying, and I love you. I wish I could wrap my arms around you, but I'm just here. And so in that moment, the only thing I knew to do was pray. And after I prayed, I still didn't know what to do. And so we just sat there in silence for a moment. But there was nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Because there was still this strange ministry of presence.
Presence, yes.
Right? Just like, I am in it with you. I feel it for you. And I was honest. I was like, I don't know what to say, but my heart hurts. And I love you. And like, in that moment, that was enough. And so, like, don't feel, don't push away because of the awkwardness. Just be present however you can. And the world needs more of that. Your friends, the people around you need more of that, to feel like whatever they're going through, however distance you think you are, like, we are in this together. We are not alone in it. And man, if there's one thing we can keep reminding people of, I think it's that. So that's really good.
And Jared, on the other end, you're bringing recognition. If we are on the receiving end of someone reaching out to us, one of the greatest gifts we can give is that listening ear and that sense of presence. We don't have to fix it. We can't fix it. We can't eliminate the crisis. We can't eliminate the pain, but we can sit in it.
Yeah, good. We're going to take one more question. Our goal was to wrap up in an hour, and we are almost there. And so Alyssa is going to give us one more question, and then we will close this out. So yes, go ahead.
Okay, from one of our listeners, how can I best help my children when they can't verbally express what they're experiencing and how to cope?
And that is a great question. Our kids have borne the brunt of it. I think in some ways it has been harder for them because they feel what they don't know how to express.
Right.
And their world has changed so much. So, Carol, is there anything you'd like to share?
With children, because they lack the words, behaviors are often the communication. And I know it's frustrating when we don't often know what they're trying to express in the behaviors, and especially I often think children are expressing what many of us as adults would like to do right now, is just throw a tantrum because it feels so out of control. I guess what I often say with parents, if we can do our checklist, first of all, to make sure that the big needs are met. Is the child hungry? Is the child tired? That can infect, we all get a little bit hangry, and especially with children, so eliminate the obvious. On the other hand, look for some of the other needs that might be missing that a child can't express, like, I need a hug. I want to know that you're okay. Looking to us as adults, that we're okay and that they can be okay and feel a sense of safety and security with us. Children do get bored. They can be encouraged to be looking for other times, and a redirection, I think, is what children look to us as adults for. Engagement. Children get lonely too, and especially as they're missing their friends and playmates. How can we engage with them? I know that's what feels exhausting right now, and I'm hearing from so many parents that you're trying to fill so many roles: teacher, parent, mother, everything for your children right now, and it's so exhausting. But look at the behaviors. Try to say, what are they saying, even if they can't use words? How can I attend to them, even if it's just bending low to get on their level and giving them a hug and a sense of security?
It's a great perspective. It's not just, toddlers who don't have robust vocabulary. It's elementary kids that don't have any idea what they're feeling. And, I think that expressing love, speaking words of affirmation, modeling consistency, like that rhythm, that schedule, helping them to see that you are not completely out of control, but that there is a part of your life that you that you are leading in. And I think the other part for us that we've had to learn is don't respond to the emotion, respond to the person, because like
Yes.
they don't understand the emotion, so there's no way I'm going to understand what they're actually feeling beneath the surface. And sometimes it comes out in annoying behavior or their own irritability or aggressiveness, but like when we can look them in the eye and give them the respect that we would want, to seek understanding first, that seems to better prepare us to care for what's actually going on beneath the surface. And do the things that we talked about. They need to be outside. They need to be active. They need to be connected with people. Our kids have had virtual play dates because that's all there is right now, but it's good for them. And so do the very things that you yourself need, and that helps them. So we are so thankful that you've chosen to join us. We hope in some way this has been helpful. If it has been, we would encourage you again to share it. For the benefit of your friends or your family, maybe even coworkers, people in your community. Feel free to share and tag and link, and more content will be available tomorrow on our blog. But again, we just pray that this season is not one you just survive, but it's one that you eventually are able to thrive in, that it creates more habits and patterns that give you life. And of course, the thing that we desire for you most is to find life and comfort and hope in Jesus. And I know that there's probably not been a time that we need that more than now. And so if that is something that you're looking for, we always want you to believe that you can find that here with Bridgepoint. We have services online and here in person as well at 9 and 10:30 every Sunday. It's a great staff of leaders with ministries for children of all ages. And so, if you're a parent trying to figure out what to do with your kid, we've got a great kids director who has lots of good ideas. And so please reach out if there's any way we can support you. Know that we love you, even if we have not met you, even if we don't know your name yet. We love you and we thank you. A big thanks to Ulana, our online facilitator. A big thanks to Alyssa for